I'm going to, at this time, send it over to Pina for the roll call, and we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. Pina?
Perfect. Good morning, Chairman Woods, and good morning, committee members, and good morning, CTN Live and community folks. Roll call for this morning, Deborah Davis. Dr. James Doddington.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Ebony Epps is in the community and won't be able to join us today. Dr. Kyle Fisher.
Morning, present.
Good morning. Leonard Jihad. Leonard Jihad. Dr. Charles Jandro.
Good morning, President.
Good morning. Michael Makowski.
Present.
Good morning. Jacqueline Santiago.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Carl Schissel.
Here.
Good morning. Dr. David Shapiro.
Present.
Good morning. Dawn Spearman. Dawn Spearman. Jeremy Stein.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Colleen Violetti.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. And Chairman Woods.
Present.
Present. Okay, welcome. I'd like to bring your attention to the minutes. I'm going to share my screen here. Can everybody see them?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Can you please look and make sure that I did not miss anyone for members who were present? We had action items of final reports from all the work groups to be turned in by December 3rd, and appreciate everybody's cooperation with that and outstanding job on getting those into us. The next steps were that we were obviously having a meeting today, and all members hopefully present soon. And I want to bring to your attention our final meeting for December 22nd, and this will be the actually official advisory committee member vote to send the report to the joint standing committees of the General Assembly. So all members should plan to be present so that we can have an official vote. We had outstanding presentations here from our three work groups, the Community Engagement and Public Health Work Group findings with co-leads from Deborah Davis and Michael Makowski. We had policy and funding work group findings with our tri-leads, Carl Schissel, Jeremy Stein, and Jackie Santiago. We had the evidence-based programming and research work groups from Dr. James Doddington, Dr. Kyle Fisher, and we adjourned the meeting at 11:52 a.m. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion, Charles Jandro.
Beautiful.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any objections or? No? Okay. And I'll turn it back to you, Chairman Woods.
Okay, thank you very much, Pina. Okay, so folks, very few special announcements other than to say that the last couple of weeks or several weeks, folks have really dug deep into their role and commitment to getting us as much information and data to populate your subcommittee reports. I want to appreciate, certainly not only appreciate the work you've been doing, but also certainly Pina and TJ, and many of you know that Ken Ashworth has been working with us behind the scenes to help pull a lot of this work together. We had to call on obviously additional hands, and Ken has a history of working with HCTC and some of the Connecticut HVIP collaborative work, and you'll be hearing from him in a moment. But again, folks, we've under the tight deadline that we have, we really stepped up and really folks have rolled their sleeves up to get us to where we're at today. And so I know that, you know, we got a few announcements here, and I think Pina has already touched on them. In fact, I'll just reiterate them in terms of the feedback. One, what we want to do, at least for today's purpose of today, is to take a look at primarily those work subcommittee reports, and just to affirm from each of you who have worked on your respective reports whether you're in full agreement with moving forward with those to go into the final document or the next draft, which is the full draft. And if other committee members have other questions related to those subcommittee reports, we certainly would like you to voice those concerns or thoughts during this time as well. In addition to that, Kent Ashworth and I and Pina and TJ will be making ourselves available not only after this meeting, but also Saturday and Sunday to make sure that we clean up any additional edits or concerns or thoughts that folks might have on this call, on the advisory committee here. And then that way we can be sure to have this back to you on Monday by close of business day, the full draft report. And so that's really in essence what we're hoping to accomplish today, and the additional work that in addition to what you're doing, what we're willing to do after this meeting and over the weekend. And so Tina again touched on the fact that December 13th, end of the day, we got our final report we're going to be voting on the 22nd. And then, you know, each of you again have received a variety of different documents that I'm going to ask Kent to actually, from this point forward, to actually walk folks through what we compiled in terms of those attachments, which includes all of your reports. In addition to that, the draft outline of the full report, the appendices, etc. And then we do want to, from that point forward, after Kent lays out what was sent to each of you through Pina and I, then enter into the conversation on your thoughts around the report specifically that you submitted, but obviously open that up for folks if they got additional input, critiques, etc. So that makes sense. We'll move forward. Okay, Kent.
Good morning, everybody. TJ, I think I'm going to share my screen.
You should be good to go, Ken.
Terrific. So first of all, I wanted to let you know that I had worked with the National Assessment of Educational Progress, doing technical report, public report, executive summary, and actually posters and all kinds of community-based materials, taking it from a 500-page document down to what would be needed to clearly communicate. And so when Chairman Woods and Pina and TJ and I talked about it, we came up with this contents, which you have had sent to you on the 8th. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to review it. First of all, I wanted to say, in all my experience, and it goes back a long ways, this committee has an impressive knowledge base, and it cuts across many disciplines, and it totals up to an enormous set of capabilities. And moreover, as you can see in the contents, we begin with the law, Public Act 2135, and that law itself grapples with the systemic effects of racism on public health. And it does so in a very detailed way. As you look at the law, our work here with this advisory committee is in section 9, but there are 21 sections. And when you look at those sections, there is a broad effort, first of all, to establish a permanent commission on racial equity in public health. And then secondly, to set up a number of task forces that deal with these systemic issues. So it's a very comprehensive statute. Our work is going to go, of course, to the Gun Violence Intervention and Prevention Advisory Committee. The report contents looks at, first of all, a foreword from the state senator who championed this work, Marilyn Moore, coupled with the chair, Andrew Woods, and the executive director of the Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity, Stephen Hernandez. I talked with executive director Hernandez a few days ago, and he affirmed or confirmed the view, I think, of this advisory committee that this is a perfect time, not to say a perfect storm, but a perfect time to deal with these issues, because there is now such an unusual confluence of public will and interest at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, and in the communities. So in the contents, we will have that forward to introduce the report. The advisory committee membership and staff will be listed. The executive summary and report in brief will draw from your final reports. And we also received youth perspectives from Ebony Epps in Bridgeport. And those, I think, will make a fine, if you will, capstone to the executive summary to raise the perspectives of youth. And there will be acknowledgements of the lawmakers who were involved in the appointment of the advisory committee. We have 2 appendices planned at the moment, and these are still being built. As Pina mentioned, we have state reports still coming in, and also other documents with respect to the research related to these evidence-based programs across the board. The advisory committee record will start with the complete text of the law. It includes a list of the video links to the advisory committee meetings, including this one, and as well the Facebook video links. And that includes the public hearings and the subject matter specialist presentations. So cutting across November 5, November 12, and November 17. Those video links will have been checked, and thank you, TJ, for getting that to us. The Appendix 3 is the advisory committee subcommittees, the structure, members, and duties, and then, of course, the complete reports that you have drafts of. In Appendix B, we have the supporting materials and the additional research. And in that, we have the written testimony, the subject matter specialist presentations that were held on November 12, and then the written testimony from the November 17 public hearing. We also have, as we have heard, additional resources coming in from the various state agencies who would like to comment. And we have a number of other publications that have been cited by members of the advisory committee and brought forward in terms of additional research. So that is the contents outline. As you know, if there are minor edits, you're welcome to use track changes on your Word documents or put them in an email to the chair and to Pina. If you have major revisions, I'll be available later today and at your convenience tomorrow and Sunday to schedule a Zoom call. I don't know how many of you have done writing by committee before, but it can be a nightmare. So I'm happy to work with you either via Zoom or phone call, or if you want to merely send me minor revisions, that's fine too. We can work with whatever works for you. The track changes function, I know a lot of you are used to in Word, and that's just fine. The executive summary will be in your final draft report on Monday. And today's meeting really is to just ask if you have any major points to bring up at this time. And thank you very much. It's an impressive amount of work in my view. So thanks.
Thank you, Kent. Folks, before we go into your reports and thoughts around those, can any response to what Kent has laid out? Is he clear in terms of the process and the approach or the format of the draft report? Any questions?
Andrew, just a clarifying question. So is the forward going to be reviewed by us, or is this something that's independent of our committee and just going to be attached to the document?
Oh, it will be reviewed by folks. Absolutely.
Just to go a little further, Charles, the Senator Moore, Executive Director Hernandez, and Chair Woods are essentially going to try and put in a very brief, compelling statement at the front of the report why it's important. And one of the things that I learned in talking with Executive Director Hernandez of the commission is that he actually has been named to the Commission on Racial Equity in Public Health and is familiar with all of the work that's being done in Public Law 2135 writ large, which is a number of task forces ranging from looking at issues like maternal mortality, looking at the breast health and breast cancer awareness needs, looking at the peer support services, and also the school-based health services. So all of these things were actually in the statute in its 21 sections. And one of those sections is yours. So they'll be giving a kind of an overview of why this is important work and the context for this broader, I think, very ambitious approach that Connecticut is taking to these issues.
That's helpful, Ken. Thanks. I know this is just such important work and I want it to be at the forefront of what we're doing. I know those other issues are so complex and I think they all need to be tackled for sure. Thanks for clarifying.
Sure.
And I'd just like to add, if everybody could please take a look at their name and their institution, and I know Dr. Shapiro will adjust St. Francis on here. Because it's St. Francis, right? We're not St. Francis and Medical Center. Yeah, so just everybody, please confirm that and just get that back to us as well.
All right. Okay, any other thoughts on the earlier part of Kent's presentation? All right, so hearing none, why don't we go ahead and roll into, again, this is to affirm the language that you've already submitted from each of your respective work groups. And then, of course, for any members of the committee, for any additional or feedback to what's been submitted by other work groups. And so we'll start out with the Evidence-Based Program and Research Committee subcommittee, which is James Dowdington and Cal Fisher.
Chairman Woods, at this time, have you or Pina heard of any other comments from folks on the committee around the language or the review of our document? I know Kyle and I can comment briefly, but no major changes.
No, actually we haven't.
No. Yeah, and we incorporated everything, Jim, that you guys brought forward, and just please make sure we put it in the right location that you requested. But well done, and appreciate all the hard work.
Yep. No, I think we just want to offer our thanks to the committee, to you, Chairman Woods, Pina, Kent, TJ, for your hard work in terms of amassing such a large amount of data in a short period of time. We'll take a look. And Kyle, unless you have any other comments, we'll definitely make sure we get you any edits before early next week.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was a fantastic team effort, and I feel like we have gotten a lot of really, really strong information that should help our legislators move forward with evidence-based programming and research. So we'll be taking a look to make sure that everything is in place, and so far everything looks good.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, James. From the committee members, if anyone had a chance to take a look at the subcommittee of the Evidence-Based Programming Subcommittee's report, and if you have any comments or feedback. Dr. Shapiro?
So it's a comprehensive report. It's fantastic. I learned a ton while reading it, and You know, when you consider yourself to be an expert, then you read somebody else's work and you realize how not an expert you are. So thanks to Jim and Kyle for putting together a great product. The question I really have is going to come up a little bit later as well. When the three reports that come up, there's a little bit of overlap in each report that is represented in different places. And I want to make sure that some parts, I don't mind the overlap. I think the overlap is actually good. It's internal stabilization and internally supports all the different branches. The concern I would have is when it comes to grants, talking about potential grants, it's really important for the three reports to be absolutely aligned so that we know where they're going, where they're coming from, and what support they have. And the evidence-based approach to it is probably the single best way to do it, so that we know that whatever parameters we put into place to require applicants for grants, in other words, if the state has funding to supply for local people to obtain grants, those have to be the evidence-based best practice, and they have to work collaboratively and not in a silo. And I think that the whole point of this law and this approach is to make that happen. So I would just make sure that all the comments about grant offerings and grant support works in the terminology of collaboration, working together, and multi-agency. That way there's no isolation. And that's not a critique of this, it's actually just it's a compliment of how great the conduct is. So thank you.
So
Thank you.
So Dr.
Hey.
Shapiro, just to clarify, you want verbiage added or no, or are you okay with how it looks? And
No, there's a portion in the policy and funding committee that talks about a variety of grants that have been in place, grants that were used in other states, and then there's I'm gonna actually find it for you. There's a section it's after the aftercare section under item 3 under supportive evidence-based, and again, this is a different report. This is the policy and funding subcommittee. And you'll find that I tend to be someone who doesn't use the word should, because we must and we have to, and it's a requirement. The commission should develop an objective grant criteria. It's an absolute requirement, and I applaud the person who wrote it because it means that they're being cautious and stepping softly, but I don't think this is the time to step softly. I think we need to make sure that we absolutely make requirements for objective grant criteria and support evidence-based informed solutions as well. And it's small little verbiage like that I think need modification.
points well taken.
With respect to the authors.
So to clarify, your recommendation is in the policy and funding subcommittee to adjust that language there.
Yeah, if possible.
Yes, yeah. Just want to be clear where.
Thank you.
But also what I'm hearing too, even as we've constructed the summary as well, and that sounds like a great place to make sure that is elevated also.
That's a good point, Mr. Chairman. Making sure that the summary exactly does that, summarizes the content and the drive to it.
Right, thank you. Jeremy.
Thank you, Andrew. So I did have a question about the report. Once again, I want to echo what Dr. Shapiro was saying. I think it's a fantastic report. Some of what you had in your report, I think we also had in ours. It refers to, my question is referring to the groups and the tremendous effort you did in trying to identify some of the groups that exist in Connecticut. Is this, I'm assuming that this is not an exhaustive, like that there are other organizations that include, that are exist in Connecticut that do some of this work that may not have made it to the report. And if you can talk a little bit about that, like, you know, as we go forward, just to make it clear that there may be other groups out there that do this kind of work that exist in Connecticut, but that you know may have been excluded from the list.
Are you asking me, Jeremy?
No, I'm sorry. I'm
think-
asking Dr. Doddington or
I
Kyle
think-
Fisher,
yeah,
but I
that's
can
what-
ask you as well,
Yeah.
Dr.
No, Jeremy.
about
I
their report.
Yeah,
You have the
completely
answer.
Agreed. I think it's important the verbiage is added, and Kyle and I can work on an opening statement on. We wanted to be careful that the example programs are not a definitive list of what we consider to be qualified programs. That these are example programs, and that there are many programs that meet these kinds of criteria. that are not listed here. So Pina did an incredible job of adding many programs, I think, that to get a more comprehensive list, but clearly there are others that are missing. So maybe whether that's included in our summary or executive summary or at the top, that we're laying out criteria as opposed to delineating qualified programs. Does that make sense? Should maybe a sentence or two we can craft with Kent at the
Yeah,
end? of the
absolutely,
intro?
absolutely. And thank you for clarifying that. That is very helpful.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, let's just add a sentence that says, we have provided examples of known evidence-based and evidence-informed programs, but this should not be construed as representing all programs.
Mhm.
We're not all knowing.
It would be ideal if they were all centrally located somewhere.
And,
Maybe that's the goal moving forward.
Okay, Jeremy, hands back up, or that's going back down? Okay. All right, any other feedback? This committee? All right. Carol and James, you good? Okay, fantastic. All right, next committee we'll go to is the public safety, the
Policy.
community engagement and public health. Deborah Davis and Mike.
I had expressed my concerns about a particular paragraph that refers to child abuse and the claims put in their paragraph. And, I certainly expressed it to the group and to Chairman Woods and Pina. And I believe that the claims can't be substantiated. I think that paragraph should be removed from the report.
No, we've done that.
We did
Yeah,
that.
that's that's all been straightened out. And so folks that may not know, I mean, one of the things, and again, I want to give credit to each of you as members of this advisory committee, as well as the staff and volunteers that are working on this, is that we've done the best we could at making sure that if there are any concerns prior to us going live or prior to us continuing to advance this, that we try to mitigate that as much as possible in advance of getting it into any of our drafts. And so again, thank you, each of you. Mike, you and Deborah have gone back extensively with both Pina, TJ, Kent, and I on some of these matters, and certainly we were able to address that concern that you had.
Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting that. And at the same time, I did indicate that most of the work, obviously, from the very beginning was absolutely echoed by a lot and a heck of a lot of implicit bias. I didn't go into a major detail into some of those areas, but that's a very overarching kind of syndrome that happens in every aspect of this work. So I just wanted to make sure that we did, extract that out. But at the same time, we definitely want to recognize the fact that in other instances across the board, we've seen it, that implicit bias, and there are those negative ills that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I just want to make sure that that's highlighted, even when I talk to Ken, that that's part of the root of the cause of some of the unnecessary, obviously, violence. But I think those are some of the things that we definitely can begin to look at and address as well. And so that was my absolutely response on that. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Deborah. Okay, and so Jeremy.
Yeah, I had a question about the report, and another, once again, thank you so much for all the hard work you did in this, Deborah and Mike. It had to do with the community risk and protective factors that were listed. I don't know what page it is, but it's somewhere in the middle of the document, which talks about the OJJDP community risk factors. And they're listed in order. It said, and the very top of the list, it says availability of drugs. And then second is availability of firearms. And then down on the list, it says extreme economic deprivation. My question is, were these listed? Is there any reason, or is there any significance in the order in which it's presented? In other words, does OJJDP reports that the availability of drugs is the highest risk factor, and then and then it goes down the list? Because my concern would be that it would seem that the availability of firearms would be more of a risk factor when we're talking about gun violence, but also that extreme economic deprivation seems to be really really more of the issue in terms of whether drugs are available or not in a particular community. It seems that that tie between economic deprivation and the availability of drugs, as opposed to just the availability of drugs that may be present in more affluent communities.
So just to answer your question, there was no risk factor that was actually higher than the other. They were, we could actually, we could definitely, kind of revisit that. But at the same time, they're all based upon all of the deprivations and the ills that individuals in those kinds of communities have actually, again, so
We're losing you. We're
and
losing.
I'm sorry, hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. That all of those are just as critical. So they are pretty much, and then of course in each individual area, depending on the community, whether it be New Haven, Hartford, etc., there could certainly be more risk of drugs than firearms, and so those things that we can definitely begin to weigh as well. And so there's a tremendous amount of work at the front end on the prevention side, and those are some of the areas that we can certainly begin to look at. That's our suggestion, purely. That's our suggestion as a part of the recommendation as well. So, yeah, thank you for saying that.
To Jeremy's point, would anyone object to moving extreme economic deprivation to the top of the list as the sort of the preeminent factor? Is that what you're trying to point out, Jeremy?
Yeah, I guess, and I'll defer to the writers of the report, but yes, Kent, that is, the emphasis on the extreme economic deprivation and availability of firearms, I think would be a greater risk factor if we're talking about gun violence. But I'll defer to the writers of the report and those experts and researchers that are a part of this advisory committee.
And that's okay. I think that works out, because in reality, we know that a lot of this stems from the root of economic deprivation. And so I think in that sense, we definitely, do look at that. And then of course, because there's across the country, so many HUD related, individuals living in housing, urban areas that have been impacted by economic, it's a given fact in some of those areas. So we have to be, so we have to recognize that. And so, yeah, that's however you want to absolutely put it in order, that's fine.
Maybe make a disclaimer saying that these aren't ranked in any particular order.
Right, that's what I indicated. That's what I indicated.
And I think what Mike's recommendation is probably one of the, maybe the soundest, a sound recommendation, given that, Deborah, if you pull this from a resource, which is the OJJDP resource, listen, we're talking about risk and protective factors. You're talking about multiples of them throughout. I think that, and I understand Jeremy's point as well, that if we decide that we're going to reorder a source, for our purposes, because of a sensitivity, if you will, or to seeking to be sensitive to how the reaction we may get from either lawmakers or from some constituency group, then we may end up reordering quite a bit.
Mm,
And so I think really at the end of the day, it may just boil down to, this is a source that we recognize as a credible source. Though they didn't list it as priority 1, 2, or risk factor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 under each of those protective areas or risk factor areas, then it may just suffice. But also we can go back to the fact that when we round this report out, when we summarize this report, that we put in place, exactly, that's really where the fight is at, if you will. A lot of some of this documentation is just sources that we've drawn on. And so I just want to make sure that we somewhat caution ourselves. Again, I have no objection if Deborah, you and Mike want to reorder something that doesn't, alter someone else's source, such as OJJDP. I have no idea,
mhm.
I have no objection to that if that's what you want to do and if it's, reasonable. But I don't want folks to spend time at this, that kind of time doing that if it's not totally necessary.
I certainly hear you about the not rank ordered list and also, the disclaimer and also the, ensuring that this is not seen as some sort of a top priority being represented by the first item on any list.
I think that's probably the best way to handle it, That's just make that disclaimer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. That's fine.
Hey, Kyle Fisher.
Yeah, I think I'm getting quickly to where the conversation is going. I just feel like the idea of adding a disclaimer to this section of this is the list per the OJJDP, and it's not necessarily the list. There are some things on here that if it was written by Health and Human Services as opposed to the DOJ, it would look very different. So, for example, I do feel like, and I don't want to rearrange, I think it's fine saying this is the DOJ's list. This is, what they say. It's probably not perfect. For example, rebelliousness is, I think it's actually problematic. There's a lot of implicit bias, like we mentioned before, and we know Black and brown kids are going to be more likely to be labeled rebellious than white kids. So it's not necessarily an evidence-based list, but they hit a lot of it. A lot of it's good, right? So they mention PTSD and some of the other, and they mention adverse childhood experiences. So there's a lot of good on the list, but it's not perfect. So some sort of disclaimer saying that this is a list per the Department of Justice, OJJDP, for consideration, I think is worth. But something to say that it's not the Bible or perfect or something along the lines of that, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, and the intention was you got to know the premise was basically not to have this to be the gospel, obviously, but these were some of the areas that folks were looking at, and then of course on state levels at a state level, sort of looking in from the outside. Everything is not as sometimes stated or as visible and as put out into the front, into the public, that people don't really think about. So these were just some of the areas, and of course each state agency may have a different type of perspective, but this is an area that I know that we should definitely begin to look at as a group, because these are some of the areas that people don't think about. And it impacts everything from both family to school, across the board. And so that was the intent here, to make sure that we kind of just at least took a preview, a snapshot of what some of the ills and the protective areas that we should be able to look at.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, I think the structure is really, really good, especially with the individual, family, school, and making sure that everything's covered. I think it's effective in that. So thank you. I definitely agree.
So just to summarize, I think what we could say is something like, this is just one credible example of a sampling of risk factors that would vary in each community.
And
And that's fine, Ken. Yeah, that's good too.
not put it in any order, right? And then
Well, it's going to
that
have to be in some order, and
Right.
there
But
it
he's going to
is.
put the disclaimer, right? But you'll do
Okay.
the disclaimer that the order is not necessarily higher. One is higher than the other.
Or based on the community you're in, the order may change. Right.
Okay, Mike, Deborah, we're settled.
Yes, have we heard anything from Ebony?
No, Ebony is not available at this time, but she's, in terms of additional
Yes,
feedback,
Has
she's,
he provided any comments?
yeah, she's provided her, yeah, she's good with everything. She's good.
Okay, that's
Yep,
good.
absolutely. Ready. Okay, going once, going twice. All right, great. Kent, we got that language. We're good.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next work group, subcommittee, the Policy and Funding Subcommittee. Jeremy, Carl, and Jackie.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Just wanted to thank my two co-chairs, Carl and Jackie, for a tremendous job and for all the hard work they did into putting into this very comprehensive report. I'm very proud of the work that we've done and enjoyed working on it with the dream team. I don't think there were changes made. There was one additional footnote that was requested about some of the levels of gun violence. I will provide that to Pina. The source is the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, but I will provide that to you in terms of an email. We'd be happy to take any questions from the advisory committee at this time.
So while you're thinking about your questions, and thank you, Jeremy, it was certainly a pleasure working with you and Jackie and Andrew and Pina and TJ and others on this section. I did want to address a concern, and I was just waiting, for the opportunity. And this goes back to the executive summary portion of the report, thinking about what will be done with this report once it's submitted to the two committees of cognizance. And recalling my days many, many, many years ago when I was a member of the House of Representatives, there's a period of time where you're just inundated with information. And while all that information merits close attention and many legislators are committed to reading as much as they can, the realities of physics and metaphysics and legislative life demand that it's just simply not possible to read everything. And so in those instances, when you're holding a report, you typically start with the executive summary. And thinking about Section 9 of Public Act 21-35, and thinking about that situation I just mentioned, I wanted to recommend to the group something that will probably be obvious to all. But I think that the executive summary should begin with an affirmative statement from this advisory committee that we recommend that the General Assembly establish a commission on gun violence intervention and prevention to coordinate the funding and implementation of evidence-based, community-centric programs and strategies to reduce street-level gun violence in the state. That is us telling the legislature that we heard what they asked us to do, we did it, and now we're telling them what to do. So if we could put a statement like that at the beginning of the executive summary, if a legislator reads nothing else but the first paragraph of the executive summary, they'll know what we're asking them to do. And I'll stop there. And if it's already there, that's great. I just haven't seen it in the draft, and appreciate the opportunity to be heard on that. Thanks, everyone, and back to our section.
No, thank you, Carl. Thank you. I'm getting quite a few head nods on that, and I'm in full agreement with that as well. Kent, I believe we discussed something along those lines also, and then certainly, Carl, both you and Jeremy have been, or each of you, but certainly take a stab at any of that language or sending us some of that language. And then we can, see what we can do to make sure it does exactly, if folks are in agreement with that, to make sure that it is reflected in this report or in that executive summary, the way that you just got through outline. Any thoughts or concerns, folks, to what Carl had spoke to, his recommendation?
Well, I can affirm, Carl, that all three subcommittees have addressed this and taken that point of view as to the establishment of a commission. And in fact, Jeremy, as you're talking further about your subcommittee report, there is language about a future advisory council along with the new commission. So what I'll be doing for Monday is synthesizing all language related to the establishment of the commission, and you'll see it. But I appreciate the reminder.
Okay. All right. Other committee members, responses, reflections, feedback. Peanut, you got your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick question on that point that Kent just made. So are we recommending the committee as well as an advisory board? Is that what I just heard, or did I misunderstand that? Kent, is that what you said? Or no?
All three subcommittees have talked about the establishment of a commission as a recommendation. The policy and funding subcommittee talks about, and Jeremy, maybe you can review.
Yeah,
that.
I can hop in. So in our report, in addition to echoing what Carl said, which is number one, we are recommending that the legislature and or the governor's office create a commission or office of gun violence prevention. But as part of that, we are also making several other recommendations, which are included in our committee report, in our subcommittee report, which is to add technical assistance and research, that there be established a future advisory council, because this advisory council is dissolved by operational law. So whether this, so in order for this advisory or a similar looking or another advisory council to continue, one would have to be created once this committee has done the job it's tasked with doing. And we do think that this is a key to everything, to the operation of this commission, is that the community does have to be involved. The community has to be central around this, and so an advisory council is necessary. And then there are other recommendations as well within that report.
Perfect. That's what I was getting at, because I think, would we not have to bring that up here, what the recommendations we want to make or you want to make, and vote on those as well? Because yes, I was going to get to that point, Jeremy, and thank you that by statute, this committee is dissolved after our work is done. So do those need to be brought up, Andrew, at this point, or
Yeah.
at the?
Well, I think once we get the whole full report done, and because there are so many recommendations, as Jerry just pointed out, it's not like we're gonna, I mean, I think the more broader, more priority one is what Carl just got through speaking to. A lot of the other recommendations are embedded in the other reports that have been submitted as well. Clearly it's a priority for us to make sure that members of this advisory council and others are engaged more fully or continuously throughout this process now and into 2022 and beyond. But it's not at the, again, it's one of just several additional priorities that we will be voting on and hold. if that makes sense.
No, I totally agree. I'm just looking at it because on the 13th, when everyone gets the full report revised and recommendation, that will be the first time that everybody sees all of that in one area. So I just, want to make sure that there's enough time for folks to make comments before we actually get to the December 22nd meeting where we would be voting on it. So just so folks
But
are
that-
aware
that-
that that's
that-
going
that
to
is-
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a part of the process, obviously,
Yeah.
for folks
Yeah.
to make comments on the full draft report that goes to them early next week. Okay. Any other thoughts, input? Let's see, got something here in the chat. Okay, I see that. All right, thank you,
Carl dropped in.
Carl dropped some language in there. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. All right. So hearing none, the next phase of this obviously is that, as Kent indicated earlier, just make sure I'm not missing anything on the agenda here. The next steps obviously is to, we got a website actually that the Commission on Women, Children, Senior Equity and Opportunity actually will be establishing a website to actually archive a lot of this work on. And that would include all of the testimonies, the public hearings, you name it, every aspect of this work that we've been engaged in. And so that way it will be there for, continued public access. And so really at the end of the day, for right now, we're available to folks at the close of business until early this evening, Saturday, Sunday. And if there's any additional changes or edits, certainly we want to be there to make those changes. That way we can get this back to you, the full draft on Monday. And that's the timeline. And again, that we're hoping folks can help us meet. That way you can, if whatever you might contemplate in terms of additional changes, get those back to us as well, so we can be prepared to make that vote on the 22nd.
And Andrew, I'd like to just share that these are the requests that we sent out and received back were from the Office of Policy Management, the Office of Legislative Research, the Office of Fiscal Analysis, Department of Children's and Families, and the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We also got something back from the Police Transparency Task Force that we thought would be appropriate to include in here as well. So I will send those out after this meeting today, so you'll have all of those responses that we received back, so you can see those before they go into the report on Monday, so you can get a heads up on that.
Okay, and certainly I would ask for Jeremy and Carl, especially as it relates to those state departments that have some of those funding where some of the dollars are at, or some of the policy is that related to this work, if you need to blend it into your report. And I believe, Carl, that should go to everyone. It's going to go to each.
It's going to go to everybody.
But certainly, folks, if you can turn your attention to that, that it may have implications for your report. Okay. If there's no other comments, thoughts, then I move to adjourn.
No?
All right. Okay. Folks, thanks again. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your weekend.